Welcome back to the Reier on YouTube channel, where it is time once again for Second and Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the number one league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Travis Reier alongside my great friend and co-host, Mr. Brent Beaird, longtime college football analyst, most recently right there with First Coast News down in Duval, Jacksonville, Florida. And Brent, it's kind of a slow time of year, but we got some things to talk about as we're live here, live on a Thursday night. So if you'd like to jump into the show chat, maybe with some comments, we'd love to hear from you. But we're going to talk some SEC quarterbacks on the show tonight. And look, we just had the 2025 NFL draft, and typically we know where the SEC is going to rank by the time the dust settles with that.
Yeah, boy. First, as a matter of fact, they have dominated the draft since 2007, which is amazing. 79 SEC players, 71 Big Ten, and you know, even Trev, even beyond the draft, the thing you see here is the domination from the SEC and the Big Ten. And is it any wonder when Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti decide to flex a little bit when they don't get their way? The thing they're showing is, we've got the numbers to back it up, and the draft, Trav, is another example of that.
Yep, shows up in national championships, and it certainly shows up come April with the NFL draft. And when you look at the SEC, specifically Georgia, Alabama, about what you would expect. Yep. Alabama, I guess, a little bit down in terms of total draft picks. And one of my takeaways from this draft was we're seeing more and more how teams in the SEC are doing it a little bit differently, because Ole Miss actually had more draft picks than Alabama, but all 8 of Ole Miss's picks started their college football career somewhere other than Oxford. They were all transferred. Whereas Alabama's 7 draft picks were all guys that they recruited and signed out of high school. So just goes to show, too. I mean, you can get it done a couple different ways, I guess.
We'll get to this in a few minutes, but Trav, Ole Miss with transfers as over the last couple of years, they're basically close to 30 again this year. Yeah. 30.
And it works for Lane Kiffin. I mean, Jackson Dart, first round. Walter Nolan comes in from Texas A&M, first round. Dart from USC. Trey Harris comes in from Louisiana Tech. Trey Amos comes in from Alabama after he transferred to Alabama from Louisiana Lafayette. So different times, Brent, here in 2025.
And Trav, real quick, one Dan Lanning at Oregon, that they had 10. And look, it's obvious he is happy there. But I can tell you this, there won't be any shortage of suitors in that SEC, Trav, the next time there are several coaching vacancies for Dan Lanning, will it?
Yeah, it almost feels like even with Oregon moving into the Big Ten, for him to get to that level of complete relevancy, he's going to eventually have to make his way east. Or maybe he goes to the NFL. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll go to the National Football League. I know someone who hadn't hit the portal, and that's Mr. Chino Beaird right there. Chino ain't ever leaving Casa de Beaird. He is a 4 or 5 year kitty, I think.
He is.
So mascot here on Second Helping. But Brent, some other things we wanted to talk about, obviously, this evening, as we sort of teased there in the open. We will also get into some quarterback news. And I wanted to ask you too, I mean, in terms of this late window with the portal, has it been as newsy as maybe you thought it would be, or has it been a little bit more quiet than maybe you had anticipated?
No, that's a good question. I think it's been quieter as far as big name situations with the SEC. I mean, the portal has been busy to some degree, but at the same time, Trav, I think there's as much action right now, and even when the portal was open, as it did with high school recruiting.
Right.
I'm glad that has not gone by the wayside. I think that's important to keep going at this point too. So and look, speaking of the portal, one of the more interesting things I've seen is, now when we'll tie this together real quick, the Washington Huskies actually have a spring game Friday night, May the 2nd.
Yeah.
Now the
Tomorrow night.
it's
Yeah.
on the Big Ten Network, and hey, Trev, if you're looking for a way to get around the portal and still have a spring game, that would qualify, wouldn't it?
Well, and you're going to have it to yourself.
You
No
really
one
are.
else is playing a spring game on May 2nd. So I
Really.
guess you give Jed Fish, the second year head
Mhm.
coach to the Huskies, some credit for being
Yes.
thinking out of the box a little
Yep.
bit with
Yep.
that. But it's a very interesting approach, to say the least. So we'll see
Mhm.
what goes on with that coming up out in Seattle here in the next 24 hours or so. So, as we talk about SEC quarterbacks, Brent, for 2025, we'll work through this list alphabetically. And of course,
Yeah.
that means we'll start with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Ty Simpson, all signs pointing to Ty Simpson being the guy when the Crimson Tide gets things going against the Florida State Seminoles to crank up the 2025 campaign.
There's a mental side of this game, and the Giants and the coaching ranks that you and I have followed, like Corky Rogers in the bowl school, will tell you very quickly that you can have the physical skills, but until you're mentally ready to take the reins, there's going to be some issues. But I think Ty Simpson may be ready to finally be able to do that. To his credit, a lot of chatter about him being the number one guy, but at the same time, I mean, the Matt kid, all six of him from Washington, and Keelan Russell, who's not ready to be the guy yet, but has incredible promise. And Trav, did it surprise you at all that all three of these Bama quarterbacks stayed? And for that matter, the entire Alabama team stayed intact during the portal.
Yeah, the thing I wondered with that trio in Tuscaloosa, assuming that Ty Simpson was going to be the guy going into the summer, which you sort of anticipated, you figured he would certainly be back in
Yeah.
August. But that 2-3 sort of mix,
Mm-hmm.
and the scenario
Mm-hmm.
where I could see the trio staying intact, and we'll still kind of see how this goes into August and everything else, was that Austin Mack was a DeBoer and Grubb
Yeah.
guy
Yeah.
going back to Washington. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it was probably sold to maybe Austin Mack even back then that as a young guy to begin with and 6'6", you're going to be a guy that's going to need 2 to 3 years. And look, if Mack needs kind of a route or a plan to look at, he's got one in his own room. Ty Simpson's been waiting.
Yeah.
Look at how long
No
Ty
doubt.
Simpson has waited
Absolutely.
for this opportunity. Look how long a guy like Mac Jones waited
Mhm.
for his
Mhm.
opportunity. So, there are guys in the not too recent past and currently on that roster that you can point to and say, hey, looks like it's going to work out all right for Ty Simpson.
Yeah.
Now, look, the wild card and all that's Keelan Russell.
Sure.
So, what you have to believe if you're Austin Mack and you're not going to move on at this point is that when it does eventually get down to you and Keelan Russell, you feel like, that's a situation that you can navigate and
Mhm.
perhaps come out on top in. And so, I guess in that scenario, it kind of seemed plausible that you would get all three back, but that seems to be the case, at least right now in Tuscaloosa. What about the Auburn Tigers? Jackson Arnold, the Oklahoma transfer. I think this is going to be interesting with Jackson Arnold for a couple of reasons. And they both relate to the wide receiver position
Yep.
because
Yep.
Oklahoma last year was so depleted
Yes.
and didn't have an offensive line that could protect him. On top
No.
of all that,
No.
he goes to Auburn. There's not going to be questions about wide
Mm-mm.
receivers,
Mm-mm.
barring injuries. on the Plains going into this season. So was it not having adequate people around him at Oklahoma last season? Now that you're going to have more of that with these wide receivers, is he going to be able to take advantage of them in terms of throwing the football down the field?
Mhm. Oh yeah. Well, and and obviously a lot of people like Deuce Knight, who committed to
Yep.
Notre Dame and then came down, but I mean he's not ready for the SEC yet, so it's going to be interesting. Arnold probably no more for his legs than his arm to some degree, but listen, to back up what you said, bringing in Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech was huge.
Pocket rocket. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, Trav, to me, the biggest thing they did, and none of people are talking about it, is they brought in 2 transfer tackles on that offensive line.
Yeah.
One of them, as you know very well, from Southern Cal.
Yeah.
And look, it this is back. I mean, I've heard this conversation with Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. If you can't protect him, does it matter? And I think you've got a little bit of the same thing here with whoever the Auburn quarterback's going to be. You've got to have 2 tackles to open up the running game and also protect the quarterback.
Yeah. I think there are just so very few guys behind center that can just lift
Yeah,
mediocre to average
yeah,
people around
right.
them to a higher level. Very, very few.
Hmm. Yes,
90% plus of the guys out there, they've got to have people around them. Trevor
yes,
Lawrence with the Jags. I mean, you're seeing that with this transition. I think they're more than anything going to make sure they put a run game around him.
yeah,
And
really.
then they add Travis Hunter to go along with Brian Thomas Jr. And so now you've helped your quarterback if you're
Hmm.
able to do more of those things. What about the Florida Gators, Brent? It sounds like the Gators with DJ Lagway, after a pretty uneventful spring for the second year Florida quarterback, the shoulder issues seem to be waning a little bit in terms of his offseason throwing and what he's going to be able to do.
Well, and there was some video of him throwing, and it was a small sample size. I mean, it was about a 20-yard pass in the indoor practice facility, it looked like. So, but I mean, Gator fan just wanted to see somebody throwing and him playing better and feeling better, and it seemed like that he was. And I tell you what, you got about 3 or 4 of these guys coming back on the line, Slaughter included, in the middle of that line. And Trav, you've got guys like Dallas Wilson, who was 10 for 195 in the spring game, and then a run game that I had over 200 yards. And again, it was a spring game, and we understand that. But if Lagway can be anywhere near being healthy with these skill position players and offensive line, this offense could be considerably better.
Oh yeah, that's what I like about the situation with Lagway going into year 2 is that he's not going to be asked to lift all
Mhm.
boats. There's
Yeah,
going to be some serious boats
really.
around him too. So absolutely, there's a lot of reason to be excited about this Florida offense and going into its first full season with DJ Lagway behind center, not just because of the run game potential, but these newcomers that they've added in terms of skill positions and explosiveness there when they do throw the football. The Georgia Bulldogs, Gunnar Stockton, going to be the guy. It looks like Brent. We saw a little bit of Gunnar. His end of the season was kind of like Mac Jones in
Yeah,
2019.
yeah.
Tua goes out with this catastrophic
Mhm,
hip injury in
mhm.
November, and it was a little bit of rough sailing at times. But I think you also saw enough from Mac, even in the loss at Auburn. He threw for over, I think, 400 yards in the game. And then the bowl game against Michigan, a little bit of a blessing in disguise in terms of what the springboard was for him going into 2020. I don't know if it's going to work out that way for Gunnar
Mhm.
Stockton, but there certainly had to be some value to him in Carson Beck going down and the opportunity Stockton was able to get in the SEC title game and then also in the playoff.
I think the thing for Stockton is he just fits the culture.
Yeah.
I mean, they love him. I mean, you can tell what they say about him. He's and I'm not being disparaging here, but this is a guy that's pretty quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he'd rather be fishing than he would be probably doing just about anything. But he's shown he can get the ball to the receivers when they catch it.
Yeah.
And now look again. There's two sides of this right now. It's the draft and all the Georgia guys going to the draft, all the Georgia guys going to the Eagles. And look, that needs to be celebrated. But Trev, that can't mask that they've got issues. That they've got issues. I think the receivers would be better after 30 drops. I mean, my stars, the offensive line was hurt the whole year. They've done some stuff in the portal to help Nate Frazier also. But look, the reality is, I think right now, I mean, we've got and really need I think, a balanced look at Georgia of still probably the most talent in the league, but these issues have to be fixed.
Yeah, I've got fewer concerns about Gunner than I do the offensive line.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
can the Dogs get back to that elite level of play that they certainly were not at a year ago? So I think that's more the concern I have for Georgia than even the quarterback position. I think you hit it with your earlier comments on that situation with Stockton. He's kind of retro, man. He's
Yeah,
Mike
he is, isn't
Bobo.
he? Yes.
His OC quarterback coach, Mike Bobo, was a Thomasville, Georgia kid, South Georgia kid. Greg Talley, Buck
Yeah.
Ballou. Now
Yeah,
I'm really showing my
absolutely.
age because I'm going back into the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
John Lastinger.
Mhm.
Some of these guys were Georgia kids from places where it did mean a lot, and they got it before they got to Athens and fully understood what was bestowed upon them in terms of being the starting quarterback at UGA. What about Kentucky? We've had some fun with this one in the last few weeks because
Yes.
it's a
Yes.
familiar name, it looks like, that's
That's
going to
right.
be guiding the Kentucky Wildcats. Death, taxes, and a transfer
Zach
starting at quarterback for the Kentucky Wildcats.
Zach Calzada's been around. Trev, I believe this is year 7. Year 7, if you can believe that.
Unreal.
So, but look, I mean, he certainly has experience. But I tell you what, and you and I are both looking at this number from our notes. Trev, they were 119 in the nation in offense last year. So, is there any wonder what Mark Stoops is going to be concentrating on in August when that camp opens up,
Yeah.
and how important that is? The other thing is, not only did they have some issues, but they also lost some guys. Barry and Brown goes to LSU,
Yeah.
and Trav. This was a guy, frankly, running kicks and being your number one receiver. That is a real loss for them this season.
And the thing that gets overlooked with them is that when they seem to have been at their best offensively in recent years, they could run the football.
Oh
Like
yeah,
they
no
had
question.
1-2 punches Rodriguez at the running back position a few years ago. I believe he's with the Washington Commanders these days. They had Cavassier Smoke,
Yes,
who I'm sure you remember.
absolutely.
And they had
Very
some
well.
guys at the running back position and offensive lines that could really get it done in the run game. They're going to help Zach Calzada,
Yeah, yeah,
even especially with the departures that you talked about in terms of skill positions. Mississippi State. One thing you're going to expect in year 2 under Jeff Lebby is that he's going to have a fully capable quarterback. Is that going to be Blake Shapen? We know he had the injury last year. You talk about guys with some moss on them that have been around. I think Blake's 24 now.
yeah,
So
yeah. Really,
the Baylor transfer, he should have a comfort level to him about playing at this level.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see how this plays out. Actually, I still like Jeff Levy, but man, oh man, he's almost had
Yeah.
to start over. Trav, do you see that number of commitments? 30. 30.
He's giving out halves. He thinks
Yes.
he's at a FCS, where you give out half scholarship. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
And really the thing, hey, look, the draft is not the the main thing about your club, but they did not have a single player taking in the draft, and that's something they want to get fixed there very quickly.
It used to be with Mississippi State, you could count on a defensive lineman for sure.
Absolutely.
It seemed like every year, you had a Chris Jones. I mean, for example, Jeffrey Simmons rings a bell here in the not too distant past. Mississippi State, there was a time where you could really put the defensive line position up there against just about anybody in college football. So it is sort of a concerning situation that you're thinking more. It's still, even going into year 2, roster wide, is this team going to be able to really compete in just about any area? And they've almost taken this place now like a group of five, or whatever, group of 4, whatever it is now, that they're losing players to the top 6 or 7 teams. Even though they're in the same conference, they got guys like Kentucky's going through some of this now too, that are going to LSU or going to, moving on to other programs that are more in that top 6 or that upper half at least. So the LSU Tigers, speaking of LSU, we know it's Garrett Nussmeier. And so with that, what are your thoughts on that situation, that dynamic, and some things he needs to take advantage of, improve on as he moves into his second full season as a starter?
Well, one thing they did was to get Nick Anderson out of Oklahoma, one of the often injured receivers they had last year. We mentioned Barry and Brown a few minutes ago. Now, they brought in some guys like Jack Pyburn from Florida and Patrick Payton from Florida State. I mean, these guys can play with that. So, Trav, my 2 questions for you are, number one, and with the theme we've been talking about, is Nussmeier the guy? And a lot of people think he's the best quarterback in the league. Can he lift the boats around him, A? And then B, with these guys they brought in and Nussmeier, Travis Kelly out of excuses this year?
Oh, he is. I think the concerns I have are up front for LSU on the offensive line, especially when you start thinking about tackle, because Nussmeier isn't Jaden Daniels.
No,
he's not going to make a lot of wrongs right if the protection isn't there, or he gets pressure and he's able to extend and or make explosive plays. That's not Garrett Nussmeier. So when those things started to break down, even with Will Campbell at one of your tackle spots last season, we saw how combustible, how catastrophic things could turn. I'm thinking about at Texas A&M, for an example. Second half there, Florida game, they got after him, the Gators did. That's with guys that you felt good about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how's that going to work in 2025? LSU typically has answers to the test. They typically do. Personnel-wise, you never worry about LSU.
No, absolutely not.
I think there's reason to worry a little bit. Not in a lot of spots, but at a couple of key ones. Ole Miss Rebels, boy, we saw Austin Simmons jump in there for an injured Jackson Dart against Georgia late in the 2024 campaign, and impressive doesn't begin to describe. It was a very small sample size.
Yeah.
But Austin Simmons, just in terms of maturity and how he handled a sudden situation like he did, and didn't just survive it. And he got the Rebels going.
Yeah.
And helped lead that thing in a big win over the Georgia Bulldogs. So what's the consensus on Austin Simmons right now?
I think they love him, frankly. I mean, he's a real fit in that system. Caden Lee looks like he's going to be either wide receiver number 1 or close to it. And again, as we talked a few minutes ago, 28 transfers, 28 for Lane, but he is quite comfortable with that, and he has understood now that he wants the running game. Maybe more importantly, he wants that defensive line as much as anything else. They only got like 3 former Arkansas starters, and Princely U also involved with this too. But I mean, Lane was in there last year. You mentioned the Florida game that really hurt them, and that really hurt Lane. That was a game he was extremely disappointed at. But at the same time, and the schedule's not too tough. And we'll hear a lot about this. Could this be the year, Trav, they get in the playoffs?
Yeah, yeah. There will be a lot of chatter in that regard as it relates to the Ole Miss Rebels. Oklahoma looks like John Mateer not paying that guy what they're apparently paying him to come in from Washington State
Absolutely not.
to hold a clipboard. I don't think there's any
No,
question that
no.
John Mateer, especially with his offensive coordinator from Washington State coming over, the expectations are going to be very high. And also on top of that, we know that the Sooners added a very nice running back piece in Jaden Ott from Cal here in the last few weeks. So, that battery, quarterback, running back, you feel good about. But as we talked about earlier, there are some things to consider here, especially in terms of the Oklahoma offensive line, kind of like Georgia's. Oklahoma, year in and year out, you expect that OL to be at a, very high level, and that's got to return to being a thing. And also, Mateer is, the numbers are undeniable, but it's going to be a step up for him going into this league. And last year it wasn't the Pac-12 that he played in, as we know. That changed considerably for Washington State and Oregon State in terms of schedule strength. But the same thing can be said that you anticipate him having better people around him than he had.
Yes.
So a lot of times those things are a wash. You typically know what you got in a guy, especially at this point in his career.
Well, a couple of things come to mind here. Trav, nada offensive players drafted from the Sooners for the first time since 1997.
Unbelievable.
Trav, do you think Venables will be reminded about that?
Barry Switzer is spinning in his full-length fur coat.
Yes.
I can't say it's gray because Barry's still with us. But he's got that full-length fur coat, that he has told people in the past is worth more than their homes. He's spinning in that full-length fur coat. Barry. My. What
and listen, let me double down on something you said. Jaden Ott is a tremendous pickup for them. Trav, the last look, Auburn has played Cal home and away recently, and Ott gave them fits.
Yeah,
and he's given a lot of teams fits. Besides, frankly, the John Mateer, I would argue Ott may be their best transfer.
That's a really solid pickup. Yeah. And should help protect Mateer, having that sort of presence to go with him there in the backfield. South Carolina Gamecocks, Lenore Sellers, you talk about high expectations. This was the guy a year ago at this time, if we did this show, we'd say was the biggest question mark on the South Carolina football team. Not just on the offense, but in terms of the prospects for South Carolina in 2024. Quarterback, and how are they going to make this thing work? But boy, Lenore Sellers answered all those questions as the 2024 season moved along. Now he's the unquestioned not only starter but leader and face of that South Carolina football team. What are some of the thoughts? What's some of the buzz about Lenore Sellers? Because tremendous upside, but there are still some things he can certainly improve on.
The thing with Sellers, a lot of the guys, and we used to write these things, so we can appreciate it, is there's list of quarterbacks. I know Saturday Down South has done one. Just about every entity that you read has done the same thing. Trav Sellers is like the number 2 quarterback in the league, speculated.
Yeah.
I'm not, I mean, I think he's got that kind of potential. Now the bugaboo here is the only Division I quarterback with more turnover worthy plays under pressure, which is 15, was Ethan Garbers at UCLA.
Mm.
But one thing they really need to do is, now I like Nick Harbor at
Yeah.
wide receiver.
Freak of an athlete. Yeah.
Trav, the problem is, though, they have struggled with receivers over the last
Mhm.
few years. I think that they really need some guys step up this year at that position.
And you would think that would become more of a popular destination with Sellers
Absolutely.
emerging. But the other side of that is that Sellers' legs are a
Yeah,
big part of that thing.
they
So
are.
maybe not as much with that kind of quarterback as it would be with just a guy like a Garrett Nussmeier who's going to stand in there and just rip it, 40, 45
Mhm,
times per
mhm.
game. But of course, Lenore Sellers now going to be working with Mike Shula
That's
as
right.
that offensive
Yes.
coordinator, former Alabama head coach. And Shula, as we know, worked with Cam Newton in Carolina. So fit looks to be a good one there in Cola. Tennessee. Hello, Joey Aguilar. How about this one, boy?
Really,
Kind of a
really.
trade, right? With
Yeah,
UCLA and Tennessee
definitely.
at the quarterback position. Aguilar previously of Appalachian State. Um, Tennessee left in a bit of a lurch with Nico Iamaleava moving on to UCLA. Is there a high degree of confidence in this situation now, or is it going to be everybody felt great about Josh Heupel doing what he did
Mhm.
back in April, but then reality comes around in August and September, and maybe it doesn't feel as it's not as much of a feel good situation when the fall comes around.
Yeah, and Aguilar was with App State and frankly did
Yeah,
well. I mean, he was a starter there for a couple of years, several thousand yards that he's thrown already. So, I mean, frankly, Trav, he has a better track record right now than Nico ever did.
yeah, yeah.
That's interesting to see. But again, and I hate to keep. This being a broken record, but the reality is this group is going to miss Dylan Sampson badly, and
Mhm.
that front seven on defense. Look, they made the playoffs last year not because of Nico. They made the playoff because of their running game and their front seven on defense.
Yeah, their defense got after it, and you saw it in the NFL draft. Some of those guys having their names called last weekend. Texas Longhorns. It's interesting because you just talked about Lenore Sellers as possibly being the second best quarterback in the SEC in 2025, and it's just a given. It seems like that most people feel like it's going to be Arch Manning at the top of that list. I guess there
Yeah.
could be and probably should be some sentiment for Lenoris and also
Mm-hmm.
DJ Lagway. Maybe Garrett Nussmeier, certainly at the top of that list as well. But boy, uh, Quinn Ewers and his draft tumble uh, doesn't make the shoes. I don't think they look that big anyway. I think a lot of people looked at this as an upgrade from day one, going from Ewers to Arch Manning, but Arch still got to go out there and prove it,
It
you
sure
know?
does. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, but he is settled. This situation reminds me when you and I used to cover Florida State. That Bobby Bowden would say Travie loved those redshirt junior quarterbacks, didn't he? Bobby did, and this reminds me of that situation a little bit with. I mean, you got Arch. He's been there for a while. When he's come in, he's been effective, even against some poor teams that they were expected to beat. So
Right.
I think he will be fine with that too. But look, the thing's going to help Arch out as much as anything else is that offensive line and C.J. Baxter and Trey Wisner at running back, right?
Yeah. I like Wisner a lot. Wisner. He really came on, because of the injuries that
Yeah.
Texas went into the season with. And
Mhm.
you talk about some of those unintended benefits
Yeah.
that come from otherwise not so good situations. I think Wisner was certainly one of those guys in 2024. Texas A&M, Marcel Reed, kind of an up and down situation
Yep.
for
Yep.
him a year ago. There were moments where you felt like, oh gosh, this guy he's going to be maybe some Johnny Manziel like
Mhm.
in some
Mhm.
ways. But I guess as a passer, that's where he's going to continue to have to need to make the strides. And going back to what we talked about, and the attractiveness of not just high school kids or junior college kids, but when you go to the portal and you start losing receivers to
Yeah.
the portal
Yeah.
and you don't really, I guess Concepcion came in from NC State um, for A&M, but that's a little bit of a red flag for me with quarterbacks these days too.
Well, I would agree, and frankly, look, Reed has all kinds of potential, to say the least. But I mean, in some ways, he kind of reminds me too of Lenore Sellers,
Yeah.
in that his legs can take him a long way, but he's got to be able to be more accurate in his throws. I mean, we certainly heard that too with Jalen Milroe when he was at Alabama. But
Mhm.
one of the good things they really went out and did, Mike Elko got KC Concepcion from NC
Yeah.
State, who's a real playmaker and wide receiver. But look, um, Mike Elko is not shy in talking about the problems with this team. And the problems are on the defensive side of the ball in his mind. I mean, losing Shamir Stewart, Shamir Turner, Nick Scorton.
Well, and then think about Walter Nolan,
Yes, yes,
potentially as one of those guys from 2 years ago, but he
sure.
moved on to Ole Miss. I mean, yeah, that's crazy when you start thinking about the guys who left, the guys who came in, the guys who are now going on to the National Football League, Brent.
Well, and listen, you've been there, I know, and you understand the resources and the atmosphere out there. But I can tell you this, and by the way, I've got a son-in-law who's an Aggie,
Oh,
and and Trev, the reality is they're sick and tired of 8-4. Okay, they had enough of Kevin Sumlin. So, and I know Mike Elko understands that, and I think Mike Elko is a good football coach, but our question with them is going to be is, well, I mean, can they get past 8-4?
yeah, and his first season was Big Sum like because Big
Yeah,
Sum
it was,
would
wouldn't
run
it?
out of those quick starts
Oh,
and then
yes.
November just go straight
Mhm.
off a cliff. And that was kind of the Aggies, and that kind of tied into
Yeah.
Marcel Reed. And
Oh, yeah.
so um, that'll be certainly a continuing thing to keep an eye on is even if A&M gets off to the hot start this season, there's going to be a thought out there. Yeah, but let's see
Mhm.
what November
That's
brings
right.
for the Aggies. What about Vanderbilt? Well, I mean, we know
Oh,
about Vanderbilt. Our guy, Diego Pavia,
that's right.
back for another year in a seismic ruling that he was a part of with eligibility and how it relates to junior college football or even prep, I guess. But he's back, and so is his guy Eli Stowers,
Yeah.
Brent.
Yeah. Stowers coming back, I think is huge. Frankly, now, the stats are kind of deceiving here. Pavia led an offense that failed to crack the top 100 in yards per play and scoring offense
Yeah.
in conference play. But Trav, I really don't care. I really don't. I mean, this is one of those things. Part of the reason they won is they were conservative, but they turned the ball over fewer times than anybody in the nation. Right? But people may not realize that. That's how you win games. They won 6 of games by 10 points or less. But I'm telling you, as long as Diego can be on the field, they are a threat. And look, if they win 7 or more, there just be a statue or something of him after the end of the season.
I call him Diego Death by 1,000 Cuts Pavia.
That's right.
Because it
Yeah.
seems like with him, it's always 3rd and 3, 3rd and
Yes. Oh
4,
yeah. Right.
and he'll get 5.
He
And
will.
so it isn't. It's never really explosive in nature. I know kind of the comparisons have been made to him and Johnny Manziel, but to your point, he's not really loose with the football.
No.
And he is
No.
physically strong and mentally strong. So you're not just going to take it away from him. Yeah, it will be interesting though, because now, no one can use the excuse of, well, we didn't see him. We hadn't seen him.
Yeah.
Well, Auburn had seen him and it didn't matter.
Yep.
So we'll see about the rest of the
Mhm.
schedule as it flips in the Southeastern Conference for the Commodores in 2025. Brent, that's a lot of fun talking quarterbacks, my man. You got anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah. And one of the real mysteries at Missouri is Bo Pribula.
Oh, yeah, we needed to talk Mizzou.
Yeah, who is at Penn State at that point. So, and look, I love Brady Cook and Luther Burden going to the league. I don't care what they say about Burden. Burden's going to be a star in that point. But, there's something I wanted to ask you about, Trav. Boy, that Missouri athletic department, and maybe they have by now. But I mean, they were like 0 for 21 in SEC play in baseball.
They were 0 for in basketball a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Softball understands in last place. Women's basketball was in last place. Look, I'm trying not to be disparaging against them, but boy, oh boy, that fan base is not happy where they are in all sports.
No. And I've been out to Como, nice town. But just in terms of initial impression when it comes to facilities and just a sense of the big money situations around the Southeastern Conference, I didn't really get that from Mizzou.
Yeah, right.
So it just, based on what I could see, it felt like there was a pretty sizable deficit that Mizzou's working against.
Right.
So unless they have just a sugar daddy of unbelievable ability, it just feels tough out there. And just to compete in football and men's basketball is going to take a lot from their people in terms of NIL and stuff like that. To compete in baseball, women's basketball, softball, those sports that are certainly important and visible. It's not just Mizzou either, man.
Agreed.
There's a lot of teams. There's not a lot of teams, but there's a handful of teams around this league. As I talked about earlier with the transfer portal, it's not like all 16 teams in the SEC are rating, the ACC or the group of fives and picking. You got SEC teams rating SEC teams because there's a line of demarcation, a delineation within the league of haves and have-nots. It's not the SEC is all haves, and then there's the have-nots. There's haves and have-nots within the SEC.
And Trav, people wonder why there's no transferring within the league on that spring portal. Well, there's no secret to that. I got two last things here. Number one, and tell me when we'd ever see this. Florida State, who opens with Alabama, has gone 7 straight years without an offensive lineman being selected. And in 6 of those years, they have not had a wide receiver selected.
That's crazy.
What does that tell you about Florida State now?
You think about the guys like Peter Warwick at wide receiver for Florida State. You think about Walter Jones, the offensive tackle in the past. That's crazy to think about those guys and then think about that stat you just ran out there.
Oh yeah, and the last thing, the best of all, May is here. College Football Preseason Magazine.
Here come the mags.
On the shelf. on the shelves around May 23rd. How about that?
The countdown, the Brent Beaird countdown is on. I don't mind countdowns like that when it's
That's
like
right.
T minus 20,
Yeah.
23 days. It's the T minus 274
Yeah, I
days.
know. I
Like,
know.
oh God.
Yeah, I
But I know
agree.
you're excited, so that
That's
excites
right.
me. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, Trev, as we go, give your YouTube channel a plug. I know you've got not just college football on there,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
got some golf and
Yeah. A little bit.
in music. And Trev, everybody wants a little Pops report,
Oh
if you
yeah. I checked
will.
in on Pops today. He was doing his shrubs. And they look
Good.
great. Now he did something to his front yard. He burned it up. He lost it.
No.
And he doesn't even want to talk about that.
Ah, oh, Lord.
But Pops is hanging in there. You know,
Good.
as long as
Good.
Pops is in his yard, he's good. If he gets to the point where he's not in his yard, we're gonna have to check on him. But
Yeah.
yeah, the channel is doing great. Reier on YouTube. We
Mhm.
certainly hope you've subscribed to the channel. If you haven't, hit that subscribe button right now. You can also hit the notification bell. That way, you're alerted to all of our content as it drops here on the channel. Also, a thumbs up for Brent and myself here on Second Helping would be tremendously appreciated as well. Brent, always a lot of fun. Look forward to doing it again real soon.
Me too, bud. Take care.
For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you once again for joining us right here on Reier on YouTube for Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the #1 league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Until next time, so long, everybody.